Hello and welcome to my next video in this series of Can You Be Consistent? Today, this video is going to be talking about reparations. Reparations a little bit, and basically more so black slave owners or African Americans who contributed to the slave trade. And I'm going to show you why in a second. I'm going to show you exactly why I say that. So I was watching a documentary today, and I cannot remember the name of it. It was called A River Too Wide or something. If I find it, I'll put a link to it. It's a documentary someone sent me, and I watched it. It was very interesting. And this guy here on the right-hand side of the screen, Anthony Johnson, as you can see, it says he was a black Angolan who achieved freedom in the early 17th century colony of Virginia after serving his term of indenture. And then he's known for the most prominent black indentured servant to acquire freedom and wealth. Now, when you look at the Wikipedia article for this gentleman, I'm not going to read all of it. Wikipedia is long. But basically, I just read all that. But he became a property owner that owned slaves. He's a black man that owned slaves and was one of the first people in Virginia to have his rights to own a slave legally recognized. So he worked for a wealthy slave owner. He earned his freedom, and he was wealthy, and he had slaves. If you look at this down here, which I'm not going to read, but I'll link it. If you read this here, this caster suit here, basically, one of his slaves, who was a black man, the guy said, well, hey, my indentured servitude is over. It should have been over a couple of years ago. You need to let me go free. And Anthony Johnson said, no, you still owe me some time. You belong to me. So this black man so it went to court. And then the courts eventually ruled in Anthony Johnson's favor, and that slave had to serve him for the rest of his life, apparently. So this black man was one of the first people to have the courts legally decree that you can have a lifelong slave, a black person, right? So now I'm gonna go to Facebook and what I posted, and I'm gonna and you'll see why this is relevant. I have some questions for y'all. This guy, and I have a link to his story on a different page here, but the layout, I don't know. I went with Wikipedia for some reason, but yeah, this is what I linked. It gives you the whole story of the guy. So that's what I linked down here, and this is what I said. This guy is supposedly the first prominent male black slave master in America. He's apparently the first person to be legally granted a slave for life. If a friend of mine traced his ancestry back to this black slave master, should I hate my friend? Should I hold him accountable for the actions of his ancestors? Is his descendants entitled to reparations? What if it turned out that you were a descendant of this man? Should black people treat you differently? Would you reject reparations if the government gave it, as a descendant of this man? Would it be fair for the government to exclude you from reparations as a descendant of a slave owner? Would you take responsibility for the state of white supremacy because of what your ancestor did? Can you be consistent? Right? And I don't think I got I got no replies. Predictably, I don't get replies when I ask stuff like that. Very little. If I do, it's some people that agree with me, but usually the loudest voices who cry, and this is why I say, can you be consistent? Usually the loudest voices who are crying injustice and all of that stuff, when I post stuff like this, they don't answer. So let's go through the questions. If a friend of mine traced his ancestry back to this black slave master, should I hate my friend? Because a lot of people hate white people, or they look at white people differently because the white people's ancestors had slaves. So therefore they impute it to them like you're a slave master, which is stupid because one, there were white people who freed the slaves and who lost their lives trying to free the slaves. There were white people who advocated for equality for the slaves during, Jim Crow era and things like that. How do you think the slaves got free? They didn't make their way free. It was white people freed them. It was white people that freed the slaves. And then not only that, not every white person, let me make sure my thing is plugged up. I don't want my battery to die. Sorry about that. Not every white person had slaves back then. So basically you don't even know if the white person that you're looking at all kind of funny, you don't even know if he didn't have any slaves. You don't even know if his ancestors had any slaves. You don't even know. You don't know that. So you're going to impute that to everybody? People are stupid. So my whole point is, if you're going to look at white people differently because their ancestors had slaves, what about a black person whose ancestors had slaves? Are you going to look at him differently? Or are you going to, oh, well, he's black, so he's cool? Can you be consistent? So that's why I say, should I hold him accountable of the actions of his ancestors? Meaning, somebody, it could be a white person, black, whatever. If this person is showing you, like through consistency, you're seeing their character and you're seeing that they're a nice person and they treat you well, it's stupid for you to judge them based off what their ancestors did when you weren't even around. So, and this has been on my mind for a while. And originally, I was going to state it like, I was going to ask if me and my friend traced our ancestry, and it turns out that his ancestor raped one of my ancestors, should I be upset with him? So that was going to be my original question. I've been thinking about that for a couple of weeks. But then I saw the documentary, and I just thought this was just so much more explicit. So, what do you say to that? I mean, I'm gonna post it again. I'm gonna keep posting until somebody replies, and I wonder if I'll ever get one. But because, anyway, let's finish with the questions. Should I hold him accountable for the actions of his ancestors? I just explained that. Now, is his descendants entitled to reparations? There's a whole nother video. Just happened. There's a whole nother video that I want to do about reparations because I want to go Facebook Live and I want to talk to somebody who's pro-reparation because I got some questions for them. And one of them will be this sort of thing. How is the reparations going to be determined? Because not every black person who's in this country right now had ancestors who were slaves. They may have had ancestors who, they may have suffered from colonization somewhere else in Africa, whatever. But some people came here willingly as migrants after slavery. So do they get reparation? Because the whole point is to compensate the people who were victims of slavery. So not every black person had ancestors who were victims of slavery, right? So, and then also, obviously, you wouldn't, as this person, the descendant of Anthony Johnson, is actually a perpetrator of the offense. So does his ancestors get reparations? Now, of course, you got to remember, when you're talking about ancestry, you're talking about a tree. It's not just like his son and then his son and then his son and then his daughter. No, it's a tree. So you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, who knows how many people is in his ancestry. Would you disqualify them from reparations because their ancestor was the one that caused the problem? I think that's a logical question to ask because we know that there were Africans. Or what about the nations who sold black people into slavery? So do the descendants or do the people that come from those countries or those tribes or whatever, do they get reparation when their family contributed to the problem? I have a lot of questions about reparations. So what if it turned out that you were, What if it turned out that you were a descendant of this man? Should black people treat you differently? So all this talk about, don't matter. And, someone's ancestors did something, so you're going to hate this person because, number one, you assume that all of their ancestors had slaves and they didn't. But they weren't there. This person wasn't there. But you want to hold him responsible for something their ancestors did. And this was another thing that's been on my mind. What if it turns out that your ancestor was this guy, this slave master? Should people treat you differently? Should black people treat you differently? What if we found out that your ancestors were criminals? They had a pedophile ring, doing all kind of vile things to kids, or they were the ones who served religions that sacrificed children. So, should we look at you or treat you differently because your ancestors did something different? Can you be consistent? Would you reject reparations if the government gave it? So if you are a descendant of someone who perpetuated slavery and you found out, would you reject reparations and give it to the more rightfully owned, to the real victims, right? Because you can't count yourself a victim. Your people's the one who did it. Another question I have about reparations is totally unrelated, but when it comes to reparations is, would you accept reparations if it was only given to black people after Native Americans received theirs and they were allowed to thrive and become kind of a more thriving community? Because it seems like they're dying out, Native Americans. So, okay, what if reparations is approved, but it's not going to happen in your lifetime? It's only going to happen after Native Americans are taken off reservations and they are mixed in with us, like the rest of us are all mixed up, and their number is greater. Would you? Total tangent. I'm gonna put that in my reparations video. But again, the question is, if you were the descendant of one of these people who perpetuated racism, would you reject reparations, or would you take it anyway? Would it be fair for the government to exclude you from reparations as a descendant of a slave owner? Can't even select it right. So, if you were a descendant of this guy and your family was a part of this, would it be fair for the government to treat you differently and say, well, no, you belong to this guy. You don't get reparations because you belong to this guy. It goes along with the last question. And then I got one more question, or two more. Would you take responsibility for the state of white supremacy because of what your ancestor did? Can you be consistent? So again, it's easy to talk about what other people should do, and it's easy to point the finger. It's easy to hold grudges and that sort of thing. But what if it turns out that you were a descendant just like these white people that you accused? What if you were a descendant of someone who did that too? Would you take responsibility for the state of white supremacy the way that you insist that white people should? Can you be consistent? What do you think the chances are of finding someone who would be consistent and will say, you know what, yeah, I contributed to this, I'm responsible? They're not going to say that, because people always have expectations and standards that they don't live out. People are intellectual hypocrites. No black person is going to sit there and say, it's okay to treat me differently because my ancestor who lived thousands or hundreds of years ago or whatever did something bad. Like, no black person is going to say, they're going to say, look, you need to treat me about how I am as a person. But you won't extend that to white people. You won't extend that to white people. So, again, here we go again with this whole double standard type thing where it's like, you don't want equality. You don't want justice. Because if that's your idea of justice, then that would apply to you. That would apply to anybody you know that's black that had ancestors who did those things. But you know people won't accept that. People don't want justice. They want special privilege. They want special status. Right? So people only want these things when it affects them. All right. So that's just that's the end of my video. And as you can see, I got no replies. So if I get some replies, then I will make another video and I'll share with you the conversation. But people who like to talk, who like to spout, people who like to cry victim, they won't be consistent. They won't. It's crazy. I made this 5 hours ago. I have not one reply whatsoever. So I'm going to post it again in the morning. We're going to see what happens. All right. Thanks for watching. I'm going to leave links to the Wikipedia article for this gentleman here. I'm going to leave a link to my faith-based page. Please like, subscribe, and comment. If this video was useful to you, then please share it.